Welcome back to the Confused Millennial podcast. I'm Rachel, your host and the blogger behind theconfusedmillennial.com. And this is a podcast all about helping you navigate this whole adulting thing. We have top experts in spirituality, wellness, entrepreneurship, and so much more that come on here to really help us all elevate our lives and expand our consciousness. And today's guest, Sahara Rose, is going to do just that for us. And she is somebody that I have wanted on the show for months now. And the stars finally aligned where we were able to connect. She has been really busy this year as her second book just came out, Eat and Feel Fresh. And if you guys follow her on Instagram, you know she's constantly doing master classes. Her first book only came out like a year ago, and she's gearing up to write her third book, as you guys will hear in the episode. So she definitely wears a lot of hats, has a lot of things going on. And of course, in this episode, we talk about boundaries and kind of how she's been able to get this momentum, that it's not an overnight success thing, and really what that entire process has looked like as she has moved into alignment, embraced more of her story, and been able to open up these different opportunities. We talk, obviously, in the episode about what Ayurveda is. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not. I feel like I always get it right. And then like when I go to say it again, I psych myself out in my head and then I don't end up saying it right. But we talk about what Ayurveda is, what are the doshas, how the doshas play out in your mind and body, awakening your life path, moving into alignment with your truth. She shares her story about getting Deepak to write the foreword to her book, and just really eye-opening, electrifying episode where I think so many of you guys are going to leave this and feel ready to conquer your week. It's definitely a Monday motivation episode, if you will. So without further ado, let's hop on and I'm going to stop talking now and bring Sahara on. Welcome to the show, Sahara.
Oh, it's so good to be here, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited. I have been following you and listening to you on a bunch of different podcasts. We have a few different mutual friends that have been on this show before. Shaman Durek, episodes 14 and 15. Danielle Page, episodes 19 and 20. And so I'm so happy that we finally actually get to chat for a bit.
Yes. Any friend of Shaman Durek and Danielle is a dear friend of mine too.
And you have just been on fire, like unstoppable the last couple years. Is it even 2 years? I feel like it's just a year, but like it seems like way too many positive things have happened from like you got engaged. Congratulations, by the way. To you have 2 books out, or your second book is now just getting released. And there's so many good things happening in your life.
Yeah, it's funny because with success, people only see those accomplishments, the book release and stuff. And it's like, I've been blogging every day for 7 years. I've been hustling at this for my entire adult life. And it's interesting because we see things as oh, suddenly you're an overnight success and you blew up, and people don't see all of, just the dedication that goes to make that moment possible. Mm-hmm. And it's just the beginning.
Definitely. I love that you said that too, because you had spent some time in India. It's not like you just kind of became the Ayurveda queen, which is, we're definitely going to talk about what that is and getting everyone learning about the doshas. But you spent time in India. You were healing your own eating habits and stuff like that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the background and just the fact that this isn't an overnight success. This has been your life.
Yeah. So my background is that I grew up really unhealthy. I had really bad asthma. I was overweight, and I wanted to get thinner because I was just so self-conscious about myself. And so I started to practice yoga because I read in a magazine that Jennifer Aniston does yoga, and I basically prompted my yoga journey. And that yoga journey led to me becoming more mindful, traveling in many different countries, doing volunteer work, taking that path, and eventually trying all these diets. What made sense to me was to become a raw vegan. So I became a raw vegan. At first I felt really great, but after a few months, my hair was falling out. I lost 30 pounds. I got off birth control and I didn't get my period back for 6 months, a year, 2 years, just no period at all, no sex drive, really bad anxiety, really bad insomnia, horrible digestive issues. I couldn't eat anything. My stomach was in just constant pain, and my bones were constantly getting injured. I would faint all the time. I was so cold that I would have to be wearing multiple socks and layers, and I would still be shivering, and people would walk up to me and be like, "Are you okay? You don't look good." Mm-hmm. And at first I was like, "Oh, it's because I'm so thin and beautiful." And then I realized no, it's not. I actually look sick. Mm-hmm. But no doctor could figure out the answer to it. I went to the gastroenterologist, endocrinologist, therapist. They all kept prescribing me different medications, but no one was like the gastroenterologist, which is in charge of your digestion, is not so how do you feel? And the endocrinologist is not so what are your dreams like? No one asks about these things. Mm-hmm. So I knew intuitively that there was something that was at the root of my problem, but I didn't know what that thing was. So I would just go on Google, on every forum, and try every diet under the sun, and everything was contradicting each other and nothing was working. So eventually, when I was volunteering in India, I lived in India. At that time, I was spending a lot of time there in college. I dated this guy from India, and then I moved to India after college for 2 years. But while in India at the beginning, I was like, I'm just going to visit an Ayurvedic doctor and see what that's about. And the moment she saw me, she said, "Beta," which means daughter. She's like, "Oh, you're too pretty to never have a baby." I'm like, wait, what? How does she know that I don't get my period? And then that hit me. This diet, this lifestyle is literally preventing me from ever having children. If you're not getting your period, you are infertile. And not only was I infertile when I was 21, my body had gone into perimenopause. So later on, I got blood tests, 0 estrogen, 0 testosterone, 0 hormones in my body, which led to obviously all the other issues, such as early stage osteoporosis and propensity towards Alzheimer's, because my brain wasn't getting the nutrients that I needed. And again, this was something that I created from my diet and lifestyle, and anyone can. So I really wanted to get to the root of this, but a lot of the Ayurvedic approaches and guidelines were super old school. Lots of ghee, which is clarified butter, mm-hmm. lots of rice. And it's sort of this kind of culture in India that you just don't ask questions. This is just how it is. So I signed up for Ayurveda school. I was studying about it, but I was like, well, why don't you not overcook your vegetables for 3 hours? Mm-hmm. Or why don't you not put ghee in everything? Or why don't you switch this to quinoa? Have you heard of quinoa? Because I brought all my quinoa with me, and they're like, no, this is not how we do it. And for me, I'm such a paradigm shifter that I'm like, okay, this Ayurveda has so much wisdom to it, so much truth. When I read about Vata, I was like, this is my autobiography. If I die, just read this over my wake, because I am so Vata. So I felt so understood, but at the same time, the guidelines, every time I would try them, I went on the Panchakarma in India, and I got so sick from all the ghee. So I'm like, okay, there needs to be something that brings Ayurveda into the modern world, because also we've changed as humans. We don't live in rural villages in India where there's never been a drop of pesticide. We don't have our local cow that we milk and give flowers to. So we need to make this system modern, and that's the only way that it can live on. And nothing existed like that. So I decided to create it, and I wrote my first book. I spent 2 years on that book, and then I went to 30 different publishers. All of them rejected me. They all said the same fears I had in my head. You're too young. No one knows what Ayurveda is. No one gives a shit. Go home. And then finally, I still held that vision of really seeing this book in Barnes and Nobles, having girls like me with digestive and hormonal and all these types of issues have this as a resource. And then long story short, I got hired to write the Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, which is part of the Idiot's Guide series. And then that became the best-selling Ayurveda book globally. And then now my new book, Eat, Feel Fresh, which came out last month actually, is all about making it modern. So all of those hardships and struggles led me, it's you prepare for the marathon the whole year, but the marathon is just one day. Mm-hmm. So that's really how it feels. It's just the start of this marathon, but it's really the prep work that I did before that to allow me to be ready to run at this time. time.
Yeah. I mean, it's unbelievable because I think so often we get caught up in the fact that like this is happening to me and like I'm having health issues or I hate my boss and this is just like the woe is me story, whatever that story is for people. And at the end of the day, so often when we can go into it and like own that, like I did this to myself. It was my choices, my eating habits. It was my choices to be in these situations, to put this into myself, to tolerate this. We can open up those pathways to like actually getting into our purpose. And there's a little story I want you to tell people because I thought it just always has stuck with me. I heard you tell it on another podcast where you had met Deepak Chopra, who wrote the foreword for your first book and for your second book, right?
Yeah, for both of them.
And he had said to you, you were saying to him, like, things are just happening so fast. And he had said something along the lines of like, if your life isn't a series of synchronicities, this is like how it's supposed to be happening. And I'm totally butchering it. So I want you to share like a little bit of that story because I think that's the place that so many of us should be striving to get into alignment with.
Yes. So long story short, Deepak Chopra was like my role model my whole life. And then I was like, when I finally wrote Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, was about to go to print, and I was like, I would love to like have a quote from him, but like, where the fuck am I going to find Deepak Chopra? Like, he's not walking around the streets. But I would just like always, like every time I would be somewhere, I'm like, I wish Deepak Chopra was here. Like, I was literally just thinking about him all the time.
You manifested him.
And so I was at this yoga and science conference that he was not a speaker at, that some guy from Instagram invited me to, and I went. And then they're like, and I remember it was so boring and I wanted to leave because it's like, here's some more research on how breath is like good for you. And I'm like, I don't need the research. I can just breathe. So I just remember thinking like the only thing that can make right now super lit is if Deepak Chopra walks on stage. They're like, time for our lunch break. And here comes our sponsor, Deepak Chopra. He just walks on. He's like, hello. And then he walks off. And I knew this is probably the only time in my life I'm going to see him in person. And we were in a massive conference with 1,000 people in an auditorium, and I am in the back row. And I just knew, like, spirit guides came through. They're like, this is it. You just have to go for it. And I'm just moving through the fear of like, what am I doing right now? What am I doing right now? Walk through the crowd, up the stairs, onto stage where I see him. And then I just walk right up to him and I stand next to him. And he's like in a conversation with someone. And I'm just looking at him like, oh my God, that's Deepak Chopra. That's Deepak Chopra. And then he's done talking. He like looks at me. He's like, hi. I'm like, hey, Mr. Chopra, Dr. Chopra, I'm Sahara. I just wrote this book, Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda. It's not out yet, but I would love to send it to you because you've been so instrumental. And I start like listing off all the ways I've like stalked every member of his family. He's like, okay, great. And like now, like knowing this, like he probably gets this all the time. But I just thought like, I'm just going to walk out to him and see what happens. So he's like, sure. I was like, I'd love to send you the book. He gave me his email. And I was like, oh my God, I have his email address. This is like God's email. And so then I sent him the PDF of the book, but I was in a conversation with my friend that she was like, what would you really want? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, for him to write the foreword of my book, but he just met me and that could never happen. And she's like, well, why don't you just hold that vision? And I was like, even just holding that vision was really scary. Like here I just met him. Like imagine meeting like the biggest role model of your life. And then suddenly like my book was going to print on Monday. This is like a Saturday. So I'm like, that's just not going to happen. And then long story short, I emailed him the PDF and he was like, yeah, I'd love to write a quote for it. And then I was walking across the street in New York where it's like super, super busy. And I was eating while I was walking. And this homeless man was waiting to cross the street. And he's like, can someone help me cross the street? And like I was late, eating, busy, halfway across the street. But something came through me that said, if you are preaching about being a good person, this is an example right now that you can be a good person and turn around and help this guy cross the street. So I went back and I took this guy by the arm and I'm like, where do you want to go? And he's like, oh, I'm actually going like 2 blocks down to the train. I was like, okay, I'm just going to like miss this meeting and walk with this man right now. And so we start walking and I can still like smell him to this day. It was like a very foul smell. But he was brilliant. And we were walking and we started talking and, turns out he had like a son that was like an engineer and one that was a lawyer. And I remember I just judged this person for no reason. And I put him in the subway. We said bye. And right before he left, I was like, sir, where are you going? He's like, oh, I'm a professor of physics. I'm like, huh. And I just thought like, wow, I totally just judged this guy and thought he was homeless and he's a professor of physics. And I walked away just thinking like, I just loved that interaction. Like it just was so human and beautiful. And I check my phone and there's an email from Deepak and it says, "What's your number? I want to call you right now." Like at that same moment, that email was sent that I let go of this man's hand. I was like, oh my God, I can't talk to Deepak on the phone. And so I called him. We talked on the phone. He said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" "I'm going to be back in San Diego. I want to meet with you." And I was like, and I was actually leaving for LA. So I was like, okay, I'll be there. So I went back to LA, like got out of the airport, drove to San Diego, was at he had a 4-hour long lecture. And I remember even just in the crowd, just even being in that energy, I was like so scared, nervous, like excited. And then afterwards, I sat in a meeting with him and his team, and he's like, "I love what you're doing. I really want to support your work, and I'd love to write the foreword." And all of that happened truly because that homeless man, I believe, was not a human. He was an angel. He was sent to see, would you still honor and still respect someone who is not famous, who does not have books, who does not have accolades, but maybe has the exact same knowledge, a doctor of physics, just like Deepak. If that same brilliance was in another costume, would you still pay it the same level of respect? And that was the test that the universe sent me to see if I was real deal about this or just doing it for the ego's sake. And the fact that I said yes is the only reason why I have that foreword. And because that foreword has nothing to do with me and nothing to do with him, but it was a soul contract from previous lifetimes that he would support my work and helping people get trust from it, not because it's my work, but because it will help Ayurveda spread. And I will support his work because a lot of 20-year-olds have no idea who Deepak Chopra is. They're listening to this. They're like, why are they freaking out over this person? They have no idea. He's like 74, 75 years old right now. He's of a different generation. He was big in the 60s. So my soul contract was to help bring him back to the millennials and keep that wisdom on. So when the universe moves through you and you can just take a step back, but still remain in action, like you don't have this plan of this is how it needs to look like. You're more feeling the energy and feeling the flow, but still taking that action, going for it. Because, I was just at a conference this weekend. It was like Eckhart Tolle and Gary Vee and all these big people. And nothing came through me to like walk up to them, like I was just like, these are big people, but I don't think I need to walk up to them and meet them. But there are certain people in your life that you have that connection with that you're like, there can be major synergy between us. And that was someone that he was for me because his work is very similar to my mission here. So when you have that feeling, for everyone listening, when you have that feeling with someone, it doesn't need to be someone famous. It could be a stranger. I was also at a conference. I just saw someone in the crowd and I was like, this is someone I need to be friends with. That is the universe sending you the message that you guys have work to do together, whether it is friendship or love or career or books. Like with Shaman Dirk, it was the same thing. The moment I heard his voice, I said, this is going to be someone I do work with. And I went to some random talk that he went to and introduced myself. And look, we did the Awaken Your Powers Masterclass. He's like one of my best friends now. And that just happened because I felt the heart expansion when I heard his voice and I went for it. So if anyone is feeling that towards anyone, that's a sign.
Yes. Oh my, I got chills during that. You just said so many different things because I think we forget, like sometimes we get really caught up with friends and stuff where it's like, why am I always in the same friendship? Why am I always in the same relationship over and over and over? And it really is just our soul contracts that are drawing us to these people. And also, I just like want to pause and like shout out and applaud the fact that you dropped the sheep mentality because like there's a good majority of people listening to this that if they had to be at a meeting would have never stopped because we just are fixated off of this is where society tells us I'm supposed to be right now. So I'm going to go and be there and I'm not going to question the fact that I'm supposed to be there. And I'm not going to listen to those feelings and those urges and those pings that I'm getting. When in reality, when we actually follow those, we opened the doors to infinite possibilities for our lives and things can change. And also, just on top of all that, the fact that it is so much about like bringing this knowledge forth to people. And I think too often we get caught up with the Instagram followers and everything like that versus the underlying message of how we're raising the consciousness and moving humanity forward to actual healing today. You know, we see things so broken. We're recording this now right after the midterm elections, and like my feed has been blowing up with a mix of absolute disappointment and frustration because certain people didn't get into office that really would have helped humanity. And then there's also all of the wins of like more women being voted into the House of Representatives than ever before. So I just really like love that, checking what our purpose is and what our motives are.
So true. And it's just, you know, the reason why most people live average lives is because they make average choices. Mm-hmm. If you choose to just do what is given to you, you will end up with the life that is given to you, not the one that you want to co-create. Because every person has to go through certain obstacles to get to where they were meant to be going. It's not, you know, life is meant to be lived in flow, but we have shitty chapters in our lives. Like, I lived through a really shitty chapter of my life just 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that was, I remember going through it. I'm like, this is just the shitty part of my memoir right now. This is the part that I have to take all of the healing work that I'm trying to teach to other people and integrate into my own life. Mm-hmm. So life is meant to be lived in flow, but that doesn't mean that there are no hard times. There are difficult times, but if you hold on to the story that life is difficult, those difficult times will continue. If you can take those difficult times as a lesson, then you move through them. And then when you're faced by more difficult times, you have the tools to get past them with further ease and grace.
What does it mean to be in flow for you?
So for me, when I am in a speaking or writing mode, that is when I am channeling. Mm-hmm. So when, for example, if I'm speaking in front of a big crowd, I can't plan what I'm going to say. Mm-hmm. If I have like a speech and like, okay, these are the points I want to make, or I could never even have a PowerPoint because that's just alone is going to stress me out that I have to remember what the PowerPoint says. For me, true flow is to just get into that state where I feel Shakti, feminine energy moving through me. That is really the energy I operate from more than Shiva, masculine consciousness. So for me, that's dancing, that's moving. I'm not a big seated meditation person, which can be really controversial in today's time. That's not how I flow. I feel more tired after that. It's good if I'm like at a conference and I'm feeling overwhelmed and I could like do a 15-minute meditation. That feels really good then. But in my life, like I feel better if I take a walk or I dance or I shake or do something like that. So for example, before I record a podcast or I do a big talk, I'll go on a walk, I'll dance in my room, get my hips moving, get like sexy. Like that is where Shakti lives. And then I just walk into it from that state. And then I don't let my mind get involved. I just let myself be in this mode of pure receptivity, where words are coming through my mouth, but I have no idea what's the next sentence I'm going to say. I have no idea where this conversation is going to go. We haven't even talked about Ayurveda yet. You know? But like, this is just what needs to happen right now. And that's where the magic is, because your guides, the universe, is delivering you specific messages at specific times for specific people. So this is just what every person listening to this right now needs to be hearing this right now. Not about what the doshas are. This is what needs to be heard, to trust yourself, to trust your intuition, because really we're going through a major epidemic of people not listening to themselves, of people listening to what Instagram followers have to say instead of what they have to say. And this is making us be held back as a society. What is going to happen to us when Instagram goes away and we don't know how we're supposed to look like, what our body's supposed to be shaped like, what we're supposed to think, who we're supposed to vote for, because we don't have people we're following? How dangerous is it that we are following certain people? Why don't we begin to follow our inner voice?
Yes. I mean, yes, it's totally, I just want that to sink in for a minute for everyone, because right now, it's the holiday times, and I do an Ask Rachel column on the blog, and I've been getting so many emails from people that want to move across the country, but they're terrified to because they're not going to have a job and they want to start having a kid, and then they're going to be somewhere without a job and pregnant where no job will hire them, or they have family coming over, but they don't want their family coming over for the holidays and things like that. It's like, I just write back to them. I copy and paste their words back to them. And I go, you already know the answer to this. You said it right here in your email. Like, if we can just tune into ourselves and shut out all of the noise, that is exactly where we're supposed to be. That's where the synchronicities happen. That's where, for me, flow is about the distortion of time. I think sometimes we get caught up that it's something that's really enjoyable. Those really dark periods, like those 4 years of your life if you guys have been listeners, you've heard about mine. Time didn't move how it does when you are on autopilot. Like, even when it's really bad, it's like things are moving really fast, but really slow at the same time. And it's just like you're in this like quantum place, if you will. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that like things are always going to be fun and like dancing and doing the things that you love. Like, you can be in flow and getting into your soul's purpose even in those dark moments, because that is what's giving you the grit to go forward with whatever it is that your soul's trying to do in this life.
Yes, because truly, this may sound weird for people, but time doesn't exist. Time is an illusion. And if we can, time exists on a lower dimension, a more physical dimension, because if we were to truly perceive that everything is happening in the now, it's too much. So essentially, we've created this continuum that stretches out the present moment and then creates time lapses on it. But when we are in flow, we are no longer in that lower dimension where we're like calculating time, that we are able to tap into this higher self where time does not exist. So for example, like when I go to a workout class that it's all like timed, just like 30 seconds this, 1 minute that, like I feel like I'm in hell. I truly feel like I'm in hell because all I'm thinking about is time. Oh my God, 5 more seconds. How am I going to go? If I go to a boxing class, let's say that's even a harder workout, but I'm not thinking about the time. I'm getting into that flow state. It flies by and it feels so much more expansive for me. So I do think in today's day and age, we are over bombarded by things, and that makes us too fixated on time, which brings us down to this lower dimension, which prevents the higher thoughts to come through. So if we can, even if it's you block off 2 hours to get into a level of flow state, that's going to bring up your vibration for the rest of the day.
Yes, I love that. How do you filter the bombardment of just everything coming at you today?
Yeah, boundaries have been major. In like May and June of this year, I went through this period of like, holy fuck, I can't do this because you get all these emails. I get so many emails, so many DMs, so many brands that now want to work with me and this and that, and I'm like, I'm a fucking writer. Like, I am not an influencer. Like, I'm just doing this to spread the word. But I want to be writing and talking, and like, I don't want to be like interacting with all these people and brands. And I was like, wow, so this is what I have to do in this day and age for my work to get out. I have to play this game, but I don't want to play this game. And it's keeping me, when I'm responding to 3 hours of DMs a day, that's keeping me from doing the work that people are actually DMing me for. I would not be the person you want to message if I'm answering all of the messages that are coming to me. So but then also my guilt of, well, they need me. Oh, well, I can help someone. Oh, they're going to think I'm a bad person if I don't respond. Oh, well, maybe I'm going to, come off as rude. So I was grappling this guilt and then this like this truth that I had to hold on to myself. And I had to set major boundaries of how I interact with the outside world. I would meditate on a moat around myself, literally a water moat with fucking alligators in there. And
I just come to Florida.
Yeah, I know. I would pretend I'm in South Florida. And deciding what were the information messages that would come to me. So I made a different email that was just my personal email, which I don't even want to be on email anymore. I just want to write and talk. I don't want to contact. I want real life interactions. This is like, we think that this is feeding us. We think this is being part of a community. It's not. It's not the same. So I created a different email. I hired an assistant who does like the outside email stuff. And I'm like, if it is super important and you can't answer it, then it can come to me. And it's still been a training process. Still a lot of stuff ends up coming to me. But I've really had to set that block. Or for example, in December and January, like I'm taking those 2 months off to just write my next book, which is about it's called Align and Attack. So it's about entrepreneurship and looking at it from the doshas. So I had to set those blocks, those firm barricades for myself to allow myself the container to move into flow, because I can't go and write a book when I have an hour between appointments or when I'm in a rush. Like, I don't even bother with it at this time because I'm in this responsive mode, which is fine. I'm in a launch, but that's pitta. My mind is so pitta right now. I'm like, okay, what's next? I'm like putting out fires all day. But for me to move into the vata, the creativity, the air, I have to first move into the kapha, the earth. So pitta is fire, getting shit done, getting things off your to-do list, like hustle, which is basically what our modern day society has taught us to do. Well, a lot of that can be a good thing because you are moving forward and you're getting things done, but then it can keep you, again, in this responsive mode. You're not creating, you're responding. So from the fire, let's say that solar plexus chakra, you have to move further down into the sacral chakra, the joy, the pleasure, the creativity, and then the root chakra, the grounding, the connection to earth, the just sacred pause. And a lot of people, they skip that. They try to then move into the vata, the ideas. So if you think about the doshas means energies, like the chakras, which many people are familiar with, the energy points within the body. The air, the vata, is like the top. It's where your idea downloads, your crown chakra, what comes through you, like an amazing idea you had to like start a CBD chocolate line that came through your crown. It selected you. It was not an incident. You actually did not come up with that idea. It chose you. So that idea lands on not just your head, it will land on many people's heads, but then you use your third eye. Do I want to move with this idea or not? And that's your intuition. And a lot of people, if they let the mind, we don't have a mind. There's one mind, a universal mind. And this is an operating machine that we were all born with that basically allows us to like judge and analyze and this and that. But a lot of our minds are stronger than our third eyes. So then when the idea comes through, CBD chocolate, and we're like, oh God, everyone's doing that. I don't know how to run a business, blah, blah, blah. So the mind shuts it off. But when the third eye is open, you use your intuition. Okay, how could this work? What would be the next step to take? And then moves through your throat. You begin to share it. You begin to speak it. It moves through your heart. You feel it. And now this is all vata. Now it's moving into the pitta, the fire of the doing it, of the taking action, of the writing the emails, of the actual execution of it, which a lot of spiritual people end up afraid of. They're like, oh, I really want to play here in the vata and like come up with business ideas, but not actually do any of them. And I was the same way. I get it. But then you have to, put some leg in the game. If you're not taking action on anything, it's really easy for you to get excited about another idea because you haven't done it. When you have like your chocolates and people are waiting for them, you can't just quit, say, oh, I'm actually going to now become a life coach. Like, no, people are waiting for your chocolates. Like maybe you'll figure out a way to interweave that, but you have a commitment, right? Like when you have like a spouse, like you might meet someone else, you're not going to be like, okay, I'm just going to leave you now. It's like, no, like you're going to have to try to make that work. So this is what a lot of spiritual people are missing. They keep it up in the vata, in the air. They don't move it through the pitta, the fire. So the fire is execution. But what happens in our society is we focus too much on that we burn out. And that's what was happening to me. I got adrenal fatigue. I really burned myself out because I was like, with Idiot Scott, I had 2 months to write a 400-page book. And I was just like in that work zone that I wasn't sleeping. I was drinking coffee just to stay up, which is something I normally don't do. So to move out of that pitta, you need to move into the pause. And that's the kapha, the earth, the grounding. And that can look like a micro, taking a walk, dancing around your room, or it can look like a macro of literally taking time off. I actually went to Bali for a month and I just focused on my next book. So we have mini pauses and bigger pauses, but both are really necessary for us. And then it's in that pause and in that space that we are then able to hear the idea. Because the idea is actually always coming through us. But when we're in pitta mode, you can't hear the idea. You have to move into kapha mode to hear it. And that's what a lot of entrepreneurs are fearful of. Well, if I stop, someone else is going to catch up to me. If I don't keep moving so fast, other people are going to move faster, and then everyone's going to forget about me. And that's all rooted in fear and fear and fear. So when we can love and trust ourselves enough that if I take that pause, a better idea, me 3.0 is going to come through. Then you can fully immerse yourself in that pause. And eventually the universe will plant an idea in you that's too juicy that you can't say no to.
So on your website, people can actually go and like fill out a quiz and figure out their doshas and stuff like that. What's the exact website again? I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So if you just go on iamsahararose.com, it's like the top, and it will tell you your dosha in your mind and in your body. So we just talked about what it looks like in the mind, but also this translates in the body. Like air in the body is bloating, gas, constipation, cracking joints, anxiety, insomnia. These are all too much air, too much wind. If you think about what does air look like in my belly, it's bloating. What does air look like in my mind? It's thoughts I'm not able to control. An airhead, space head, space cadet. We have these words in our language. So it's interesting because your dharma, your purpose is related to your dosha, which has been a major part of my work this past year. But those things that you are good at are also going to be the areas that you are having issues in too, because they come hand in hand. So that creative person who's coming up with lots of ideas, they probably are kind of anxious and kind of like on the edge and on the move. That's just what comes with the package. So you have to move into the pits of the fire. Then that fiery person who's getting shit done, who's executing the Gary B, Tony Robbins personality, they probably are really maybe fixant on what they want. And if things don't move their way, they freak out. Like, this is the schedule, it's going to go as planned. So they have that CEO type personality, but on the other side, maybe they don't have as much flow. Maybe they don't have as much spontaneity. Maybe if you really ask them what's the purpose, they're like so caught up in the doing that they're not actually questioning why they are doing it for. Then in the body, it manifests as heat, as hyperacidity. There's too much heat in the Agni, the digestive fire. So it's moving through your body, which leads to acne, rosacea, inflammation, redness in the skin. These are all symptoms of too much heat. Then from that heat place, you move into the earth. And then the earthy person is calm, cool, collected, chill. Think Oprah. But the other side of that is maybe they are resistant to change. Maybe they're saying, well, everything is fine as it is, so why should I change it? And that can leave them stuck in situations that are no longer serving them, because they see the amount of strength it takes to get through that is maybe overwhelming at that situation. So they're not supposed to move right into the pitta. They're supposed to move into the vata, the air. That person who is a mom that just spent the past 20 years of her life raising her kids, like, that's a job right there. You're not supposed to go straight into the workforce because Gary Vee told you. You're supposed to dream. You're supposed to say, what do I really want right now? What could my ideal life look like? What does my dream life look like? My dream relationship, my dream this, my dream that. You move the earth into the air. It's like precipitation, right? And then when the earth is too stagnant, that's when you get heavy. That's when you gain weight, especially in your hips, your thighs, and your arms. You're grounding. You're getting too stuck, too rooted. And in the arms, because you're literally holding space for everyone. And that's what happens when there's too much kapha. You put other people in front of yourself. And that's why kaphas tend to lead to binge eating, emotional eating, because they've given so much energy to others. They're like, I need to get it in somehow. So for kaphas, it's putting yourself first. It's respecting and honoring yourself as much as you do everyone else. And kaphas often hold the story, I'm lazy, and that is false. They are not lazy, because when it comes to other people, they're never lazy. It's just when it comes to themselves. And that has nothing to do with laziness. That has to do with worthiness.
This is literally my husband to a T. And we literally had the conversation last night because he's currently going through the process of raising money for his company. And I'm like, it's literally just about worthiness. That's all it comes back to. I literally just wrote on, I have a little like those felt boards with like the letters on it. Yeah. And I wrote, abundance is the result of worthiness. Yes. And that's literally what I keep telling him. And he's kapha. For all these different ones. So when I had first heard about, I'm going to try not to butcher it because we had practiced it before we hit record, Ayurveda. What's it called? I had first taken the test on other websites before learning about you and learning about your work. And I always came up as tridoshic. And so what is that? What's the deal with that? And then when I took it on yours, it was vata mind, pitta body. So how does all of this kind of come together and make sense? How do you make sense of it?
Yeah, so we're each born with a unique set of all three of these doshas, all three of these archetypes or energies. So you may have been born primarily, I think you're more pitta. I think the order is that you were born with that I can see from you is Pitta, Kapha, Vata. But in your mind, you're having more Vata because you're coming up with ideas and you're in these types of conversations. And as a society right now, we've all become very Vata, very airy, because the internet, we're doing things, everything is up in the air. Like before, it was just like very, like the older people are not super Vata because it's like, okay, your business is like a shop that you can like see, and like everything was like really tangible, and that's very like earthy, it's all material. Whereas now we're having this conversation across the country, like it's so cool, you don't even exist, I can't touch you, like that's so Vata. So all of our minds have become more Vata, even if we were not born with it. But that's why the elevated Vata has led to an increase in anxiety, which is really going to be the major issue in our generation, especially the millennials, because with all that Vata, you're like, it's when something is not real, when something's not physical, you're not able to fathom the full grasp of it. So you're like, you can have all these emails coming to you. In real life, could all of these people come up to you and have a conversation with you? No, only one person or two people can come up to you at a time. You're not going to have 100 people a day come up to you and asking for things. That wasn't a problem back then. Well, now it is, but we're still interacting to it. Like there are all these humans talking to us. So it's creating all this excess stress because our bodies have not evolutionary come up to this period of time, because it's really only been like 10 years that we've been operating this way. So it's like this major increase in human and brain interaction, but a decrease in physical human interaction. So that is why all of our Vatas are elevated. We are more creative. We're able to think outside the box. We're all more eccentric, especially as a millennial group, but we're anxious, a lot of insomnia, a lot of worrying, a lot of comparison, a lot of confusion, confused millennial. It's like, what is I used to always, my parents would always tell me, you're confused. I always carried that label of like, I'm just a confused person. But really, confusion is the result of not being in touch with your truth, because when you're in touch with your truth, there's nothing to be confused about. Confusion just comes when you are not sure whether it's your truth or someone else's truth or a story you were told, and what that really is coming from. So I was always like, I'm just confused. And really, it was just because I wasn't listening to myself, and I needed someone to echo back to me what I truly knew, but was so distant from.
Definitely. I mean, I laugh because when when the name came to me, it was literally after I had just like had a falling out with the business coach I had hired, and like the business coach that had trained her. And I realized once again, I was building somebody else's dream, not my own. And I literally was crying to my husband. I was like, I'm just another confused millennial that has no idea what I'm doing with my life. And it was like a lightning bolt hit me. I grabbed my laptop, bought the domain. 2 days later, I had a blog, and then that was, here we are 2 years later. And
because people resonate with it so much. It's like, as a generation, we are all, I'm not going to say we're confused because we're not, but we're all labeled as confused, whether it's self or from others. And it's just because there's so many options that are now available to us that weren't available in those times. So no wonder you're going to be overwhelmed by the possibilities.
Totally, for sure. So we all have these kinds of different, it makes sense like why we're all kind of a little bit more Vata. It makes sense why, I mean, I see everybody today constantly talking about their anxiety, constantly with this, that, and the other. For me, what I find like the greatest struggle, and I don't know like how to change it, because I do feel very Pitta, and then I end up kind of like spiraling out, if you will, because it's like, I'm not burned out, but I don't know where to go forward. But then I want to do 5 million different things. And then I try doing 5 million different things. And then I feel like I'm tripping over myself to get them all done.
So my next book is called Align and Attack. and that is literally because we begin attacking before we've aligned. So the reason why you're feeling burnt out is because you're doing a million things, and a million things are not all your truth, They all could be at one point in your life in this greater continuum of time. But to really create something, you need to be totally dedicated to one thing, which is hard because we're all like, well, I like fashion and I like jewelry and I like to go to Africa. You can do it all, but you're not going to do it all right now. So for me, what was major for me was like, okay, I'm just going to work on this book. I'm not going to do anything else until this book is done. I still had my health coaching practice, still had to make money in some way, but I wasn't every time a new idea would come to me, even a new book, like even while I was writing that book, I like kind of wrote another book that I just got excited about, but I was like, no, I can't move forward with this. Like I need to, if there's one thing I'm going to do, I just need to get this done. So if you can really dedicate yourself to one thing, even if you don't think it's going to be the only thing you do in your life, and you see that through, you move the vata into the pitta, you really take action on it, without the distraction, without moving back up into the vata, you fully move through the chakras. Then when you're feeling like you're hitting a wall, when creativity is no longer coming through, you don't know what to do, you take that sacred pause, which can be a day, which can be a month, which can be whatever. And then you're like, okay, what is the thing that I'm missing? And you're going to know when you take that pause. It's going to come through very, very clearly. And sometimes the things that we are anxious about that are worrying us are signals from the universe of a boundary that needs to be in place. You know, that's what I don't like about this like modern spirituality movement that's like, quiet the mind, like just think positive thoughts. It's like, no, if there's a constant anxious or negative thought that's screaming at you every time you're in yoga class, like, honey, you need to do something about it, because you can try to just breathe it away. But if it's in your control, which pretty much everything is in your control, that's a boundary, or that's a conversation, or that's a action that needs to be taken for that to go away. Quieting your mind is just putting some, manure over it, but the seed is still going to be blossoming into its own little anxious flower. So I do think that is important for us to pay attention to what those anxieties are. And let's say it's like, okay, I'm overwhelmed. Well, what's the solution to being overwhelmed? Like literally, I used to have like full on therapy sessions in my head. Okay, why are you doing this? Because of this. Okay, why did you do that? Okay, this. Why? I just keep going back and forth. And if that's too like heady for you, even write it down. Like I would be writing down like, okay, what is the next thing I can do? I can do this. Okay, what would that look like? Okay, it would look like this. Like the same thing, like we do this all the time with our friends. But when it comes to ourselves, we're like, I don't even know. When we see our other friends, we're like, duh, like you do this. So have that conversation, be your own life coach. And this is going to be so much more valuable than someone else telling you, because you know the whole picture. No one else does, That person just is seeing you from one specific lens. And as we know, we are changing all the time. It's like, let's say you have a conversation with your best friend about your husband and you're like, oh my God, he's being such a dick. Like he's so annoying. And then the next time your friend is going to have like, your husband's a dick. Like she's going to be thinking that, but she doesn't know the whole picture of also what an amazing person he was. And you guys cuddled last time, you guys made up. She's only seeing that. So that is why we need to trust our own intuition more, instead of like having the springboard of other people, which can be helpful, but that's not going to be where we really, really find our truth.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's how I work through everything. It's pretty much, I just talk at my husband literally said to me yesterday, he's like, being married to you is easy. I just have to sit there while you talk and you always get to your own answers. And I don't really have to do anything other than ask the occasional question when you ask me to ask the questions and poke holes in like your logic and your thought processes. I'm like, yeah,
that's an amazing thing to have. Just someone who can just hold space. And that's really what we need. And that's the coffin, him that's able to hold that space. If I did that with my fiance, he's super pitta. He'd be like, okay, well, this is the thing. Execute on it. Go. So I'm like, I can't even tell you.
That's literally our relationship, because I'm like, why are you doing this? I told you to do this 15 million times. You're still having the same issue. And I told you these are the affirmations, these are the meditations, these are the things that you want to go do. This is the conversation you should have to remove this block in your life. And he's like, okay, I got it. Okay. I'm like, okay.
And that's why it's good to be in a relationship with people of other doshas, because imagine if he was really pitta, you guys would be butting heads all the time of like, who's going to be in control. His confidence, his chillness is what lets you just be like, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm good. Because like pitta is like fire. So it like can erupt like a volcano. And then it's like, okay, we're all good. Like my dad, I remember he would like freak out in anger and then be like, so where are we going for lunch? And I'm like,
yes.
But like for him, it's like, it's out of his system. Like he's over it. But like for me as more vata, I'm like still thinking about it and analyzing it and this. And I like can't let go of it. I'll like, will hold on to it for the rest of my life. So it's interesting to know your partner, your family members' doshas, because then you're better able to understand them. Now I'm able to see like, okay, no wonder he's so pitta and all he eats is red meat. Like his pitta is just off the charts right now. So I'm not going to take it seriously.
Yes. Speaking of eating red meat and stuff like that. So your first book, The Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, you work through, help everyone figure out what their doshas are, what that means for their body types, foods that they should be eating if something's in balance or out of balance, different foods to be bringing into your life. And now your new book that's out is actually doing modern cooking recipes, so we can leave the ghee behind and we can leave like the overcooked vegetables behind. And so first of all, it's amazing. Like, I love what you're doing. And so why don't you talk a little bit about just how food even fuels our system, fuels our ability to function in alignment, and like why this is even important?
Yes. So everything that we put into our body will create our body. You know, you're literally creating your cells, and your cells are changing all the time. Like you are not the same person as you were when you were 12 years old. Mm-hmm. Like there's not one cell in your body that is the same. So we are ever changing, and what we are being created with are the food choices that we put into our body. So that's how important this is, and people don't realize. So, and I'm sure your audience realizes. And beyond the food, there are qualities of food. We focus so much on calories and macros and micronutrients and all that stuff. Like, I studied sports nutrition. I was a health coach. I super geeked out on that. But then I realized you're missing the bigger picture, which is like the energy of the food. Mm-hmm. And for example, like when you drink coconut water, how do you feel after? Like, what does your temperature feel like?
Oh, I hate coconut water, so it does not agree with me at all.
Really? Well, so you're very pitta, so your body's like, I hate being cool. But typically it makes people feel really cold. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you have something like ginger, what does your temperature feel like?
That I get hotter, but like not a lot.
Hotter.
Yeah.
Right. It's heat building. So in every culture, not just in Ayurveda, we have qualities of food. Some make you more cooling, some are more warming, some are more heavy, some are more light, some are more rough, some are more, rough would be like if I just took some lettuce and I just chomped the whole head. It's really rough. It's hard to digest. Whereas if I blended it, that's really smooth. You need both. If you only had smoothies, your body's not going to be able to digest real food anymore. Mm-hmm. But if you only had really rough food, you're going to have a hard time breaking down food because it's so tough. So we need this balance of these energies, of these qualities. And what Ayurveda did 5,000 years ago when it was created, and it's the sister science of yoga based off of mind-body balance, is looking at these foods. What qualities do they have? Then what qualities do you have? What dosha are you? And what foods will bring you back into balance? So if you're feeling more vata, more airy, bloating, gas, constipation, anxiety, insomnia, you need more grounding foods, more warming foods, cooked foods. If you're eating a lot of raw, dry foods like smoothies and salads, which is basically what society has told us to forever eat to be healthy, what we are creating is a global vata imbalance, which I had and many people have. So many girls I talk to don't get their periods anymore, have those exact same issues because they're not getting enough nourishment through their food. You need sweet potatoes, beets, ginger, tahini, things that are really going to nourish your body. Now, if you're more pitta, you feel hot, you are probably on the go, you probably like to drink coffee. Do you like to drink coffee?
No.
That's really good because a lot of love coffee.
I went through that phase when I was a teenager, and then I very much just listened to my body. When I found out I was pregnant, I had naturally just stopped drinking coffee. I stopped wanting it, but before that, I'd have 1 cup a day iced, and that was it.
Yeah. So coffee is like pitta juice. It makes you more pitta. It's like you're on the go and you're moving, and it's very stimulating. So a lot of pittas, since they're out of balance, they further want that because a body out of balance further craves the foods that knock it off balance. A body in balance further craves the foods that bring it back into balance. So the coffee, spicy foods, garlic, tomato, onions, that's really good. So if you don't like it, your body is in balance. If you loved it, I would say your body is off balance.
I like sweet onions cooked into butternut squash.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's much, much better. Butternut squash would be really good for pittas. Pittas need more sweet stuff, more bitter stuff, and they can do raw foods because they have a stronger digestion. So you can do a variety of cooked and raw foods. I wouldn't do 100% raw because it's really high in nuts and it's just too cold. But you can do cooked and raw foods, especially in Florida where you live. You can definitely do way more raw foods because keep in mind, in India, no one can eat raw foods. That's why Ayurveda says don't eat raw foods because you will literally get sick if you eat raw foods in India. Trust me, I've been there. I've been sick AF. And there's so many parasites and bacteria in the soil that if you eat raw food without heavily cooking it, you will get sick. Mm-hmm. So in ancient Ayurvedic times, they're like, okay, we need to really heavily cook everything and add tons of anti-parasital spices to it because that's the only way we're going to be healthy. Mm-hmm. Whereas today in America, we have the opposite problem. We don't have enough bacteria and minerals in the soil. It's too clean in there. So overcooking our food is just even killing whatever nutrients was left in there. It's killing it even more. So even over blending it, do not blend anything for more than 7 seconds. If you're making a smoothie, pulse that shit. Don't blend it for like 30 seconds and take a walk and come back. That is so bad for the cell walls of the food. You're depleting it.
So like don't use the Vitamix smoothie setting.
I have like the regular one, but I would never put it on high. Like I'm putting it on, like I started on like the number 3 on just the regular one. And then I'll like kind of move it up to 5 and I'm really using that like thing, like pushing down the stuff. But I let little like kind of chunks of the leaves remain in there because, and when I'm having a smoothie or even a juice, I'm chewing it because your body needs to chew things. When you're chewing things, you're giving a signal to your body that I'm eating food. When you drink something, that's going through a different valve. It's not even perceived as food. Green juice is food. So even if you have a green juice in your mouth, don't chug it, chew it. So back to pittas. So pittas, green juices, smoothies, they can do that, but still not cold, still not iced. It's just too much of a temperature change for the body that it takes away from the energy expenditure that your body already preserves. Like 80% of our daily energy goes to digestion. And something that's cold, let's say to be frozen, it's 32 degrees. So something cold, let's say it's 30 degrees, and something that's inside our, like what is our temperature? When you take your kid's temperature, what is a normal human temperature?
I have no idea, like 98? I don't know. She's still inside my body, so I'm not sure.
Oh, Mary, you haven't had her yet?
No, I'm pregnant.
Oh, okay. So 98 degrees, like the best boy band ever.
I have no idea. I should probably learn that before she gets here.
They don't teach you that at mom school. Yeah. So 98 degrees to 32 degrees, like that is almost a 70-degree difference. And your body is going to have to expend a shit ton of energy to take something that is 30 degrees and bring it up to pretty much 100 degrees. So it can do it, but that's going to take away from the energy needed for digestion. So that is why Ayurveda says don't have anything that is iced and cold. Even if you're a pitta, you can do raw, like refrigerated, but not iced. And then for kaphas, what they need are more stimulating foods, more spices, more definitely bitter stuff like Brussels sprouts and asparagus and kale. But sometimes they can't eat raw foods. Their digestion is not strong enough. So they should like lightly cook it, saute it, or steam it just to help break down the cell walls. But again, you don't want to overcook it because then it becomes mushy and heavy and really dense. But kaphas can eat raw foods and some can't. Again, listen to your body, but go for the stimulating foods, the spices, the cayenne pepper. Whereas the pitta should not have the spices. The vata can have some, but not too much. So, and then in my book, in Eat, Feel Fresh, I make everything tridoshic. So it's one recipe that works for all 3 doshas, and then little variations you can do for each one. Like, okay, if there's a pitta in your family, maybe replace the garlic with asafoetida, which is another herb. Or if there's there's no dairy in the book. Dairy is imbalancing for kapha. So there's no dairy in the book. There's really no raw food in the book. Everything is cooked. So that's fine for the vata. So then pretty much it's just the onions and garlic that can be imbalancing for the pitta, and I give suggestions on ways that you can either reduce it or replace it. So that just makes it easier because instead of freaking out about what your dosha is, you can just make one meal for your family and do little alterations. Like maybe you're going to have a salad on the side. Maybe this person's going to add some extra spices to it. Little things you can do like that, which is actually the way that they eat in India. When I lived with Ayurvedic doctors in India, I saw that they were all eating the same food. And I was like, wait, aren't you going to eat your kapha meal and you're going to eat your pitta meal and you're going to eat your vata meal? And they're like, no, because as a family, we eat together. And we're so missing that in Western culture. We've become so obsessed with the individual that we forget that one of the most nourishing parts of food is to just eat it together as a family.
It's true. What's that called? That's one of the things that we have always done. And it's just I mean, that's when you actually get to connect again. And it's just a beautiful thing to do. I'm still freaking out about this ice thing, though, because I love iced water. Like, maybe it's just because I'm in Florida and it's like 100 degrees all the time.
It's just in the mind, because actually when you have something iced, you actually get more hot, because the amount of energy your body needs to expend later on, you're going to get more hot. So if you think about it, like when you look at like old Chinese people, they're like constantly just like sipping on tea. Why? Because that aids digestion. It's the same temperature as your internal organs, so it's soothing your body. It's allowing your digestion to like soothe and release. Whereas when you're putting ice on it, it like contracts, and then food's not going to be able to move through. So you may feel cool on the get-go because of the initial temperature, but then the energy your body has to expend to heat that up is going to make you more hot. If you have like ice cream on a hot summer's day, you're going to actually feel more hot later on. Think about it. In India, it's 120 degrees in the summer, and they still don't eat anything iced. It's really unheard of.
Yeah.
Like, when you make the switch, at least just change to room temperature, and you're going to stop craving it like in a week.
Oh, we'll see what happens with that, because that's going to be tough. No, it's funny that you say that, because it reminds me, there was an episode of One Tree Hill where Sophia Bush's character was like, it was a freezing cold night and she wanted to get ice cream, and Stephen Coletti from Laguna Beach was her date on this episode, and he was like, it's too cold out. She's like, no, it'll bring your body temperature down and you're gonna feel great. Like, it'll actually feel less cold outside. And so there you go. It all comes full circle.
And we just had to watch One Tree Hill. It teaches us everything about Ayurveda.
Where can everyone find you to keep learning about Ayurveda and everything else you have going on?
Yeah, so the best place is on Instagram. My Instagram is at I am Sahara Rose, Sahara like the desert. If you heard me on this podcast, shoot me a message. Would love to hear from you. And I have a podcast also called Highest Self Podcast, which is all about becoming your highest self. So figuring out what it is that you want to do in this world, and then also kind of the action steps on what you can do to get there. So check that out. And I have a quiz on my website, lots of free gifts and downloads and ebooks on iamsahararose.com. And my new book is called Eat, Feel Fresh. That is a plant-based contemporary Ayurvedic cookbook. Really makes Ayurveda easy, accessible, modern. You can meal prep. It's like nothing in there is like intense. It has recipes from all over the world. It's not just Indian food, from Thai food and Mexican food and everything in between. So that is a good place to start for food. And Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, if you want to just learn everything there is to know about Ayurveda, you'll find it in that book.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right. So obviously you guys can see why I have been so excited to have her on the show. Fantastic guest, fantastic speaker, all around, just fantastic person doing amazing work. I will link her books in the show notes and all that good stuff to make it really easy for you guys to go ahead and find. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the subscribe button, take a screenshot, share it on Insta stories, tag me at The Confused Millennial. I love seeing which guests you guys are responding to more, which ones that you guys, if you have suggestions for who else you'd like to see on the show. So thank you guys for everyone that does already do that. And if you haven't done it yet, I'd love to hear from you. So with that, hit me up, Rachel at theconfusedmillennial.com, or on Instagram at theconfusedmillennial. And I will talk to you guys in a couple weeks. We are getting closer to the baby's due date. So a lot of you guys know that I dropped down the recording schedule to every other week. So that way when the baby's here, I didn't have to shut down the podcast altogether. So by the time you guys hear the next episode, I am pre-recording these. The baby may be here. We'll see what ends up happening, or she'll be getting close. So with that, make sure you guys are also staying tuned to Insta stories, because that's definitely where I share more of that information and closer to real time than any other platform. All right. So now that I'm done rambling, I will talk to you guys in a couple weeks.